Hey, Fluffers. It's Adam here. Just a little message before the show itself begins. We had some major issues with the audio in this one. Through the recording, my volume kept jumping around. Nothing that I could do seemed to fix it. And then when I've come to look at the episode itself, oh boy. So I had two choices. Either this show came out a week late, which with the busy schedule that we've all kind of got at the moment, I couldn't see a way of making that work. Or I revert back to the backup recordings, which are these ones. I've done the best I can. I hope it sounds okay. You have my utmost apologies for it not being our usual standard, which I know is not great to start with, because we're a very guerrilla operation. So, with all that being said, have a listen. Hope you enjoy. It's a lot of George talking about Nurgle. Roll the cold open.
The earth is starting to crack. The clouds begin to turn black. The temperature in the sea is rising. The plants, the animals are dying. Nurgle's plague dancers have come. You feel your skin start to itch. The breath in your throat begins to hitch. Rashes all over your skin. Blisters and boils, a painful fever for some. For Nurgle's plague dancers have come. Pray to your emperor now, for a quick death for him to allow. Your prayers shall never be heard, as you march along undeterred, screaming for your life. You're done. Nurgle's plague dancers have come.
In other words, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nurglehammer. Roll the buboes.
Fluffers, what is best in life?
Yeah, roll the chanting and dolorous drones of the suffering.
Roll the Nurglings.
Oh, they do. They actually do, don't they? Sort of gambol along. Yeah?
Oh, can we go Nurgling bowling?
What is it with like Games Workshop and the Nurglings? They friggin' love those things, don't they?
It's like the old Snotlings. You know, it's something small and slightly cute, but also grotesque.
Also really gross, like really horrible. I mean, have you guys read the Liber Chaotica Nurgle?
No.
Oh my god, that's got the entire life cycle of a Nurgling in it. And they are like, they've got the funny edge to them, but they're gross in that book, because that book has got like an adult content warning on it, you know. Really? The Slaanesh one goes far, further than almost any other like Slaanesh book, and so does the Nurgle one.
That's it's a shame those books are so expensive.
They're pretty damn expensive, aren't they? But didn't they reprint them? Or aren't they going to reprint them at some point?
I've heard rumours that they're meant to be getting a reprint, but I've never seen anything of it, so I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not.
To be honest, they should rewrite them now, because they're brilliant. I mean, if you ever want to get into the metaphysics of chaos, how it works, how the gods operate in AOS, how the warp works in 40k, you need to read those books, because they detail everything in the most explicit metaphysical detail. But the thing is, it refers primarily to the old world, to the world that was, because of course this was way back in the early 2000s, so they need to rewrite them for the mortal realms now.
Were they a limited release when they came out?
They
those
were.
books?
In fact, there were multiple
that'd be why then.
multiple different versions. You could get the paperback ones, which are the ones I've got. There were very limited editions that had all sorts of wild and wacky covers. So the Nurgle one was like a rubber cover that had like all boils and things all over it.
Oh, lovely.
The Zeech one was mirrored, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow.
It had mirrors on it. The Slaanesh one had leather. And I don't know, I can't remember what the Khorne one was. I think it had like brass locks over it and stuff. Like, it was really elaborate,
cool.
like really elaborate. And then they did a big sort of hardback edition that had all of them together, which I've got and is mega expensive. If you go and try and find that on eBay now, bloody hell.
How much you looking for? Do you remember last time you saw?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money because it was a limited
500?
release.
More than 500?
No, it's not more than 500, but you're talking like 300, 400.
It's still a lot.
It's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a very good book, though. It's very good. I mean, they're loads of fun to read as well because they're written. They're not just like dry background books. They're written by a Templar of Sigmar named Marius von Helscher, and he has been tasked with the onerous duty by the Church of Sigmar of compiling all of the forbidden knowledge of chaos for the Church. And as he's doing it, he's going mad. Chaos is seeping into his soul, and he's starting to see things, and he's starting to experience things. And by the end, he's like full on, like Chaos Champion by the end. It's really interesting. And you get things like the life cycles of the Nurglings, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting. They actually grow not only inside like the demons and the great unclean ones, but inside of people as well. They start as like little cysts or little boils inside your intestines, and eventually they do vacate, as it were, via one orifice or another. And apparently, they've got a bit of an attachment to whoever births them, quote unquote. So they'll basically follow them around and give them little gifts. So they'll sour milk or give them like a little bubo or a rash or whatever. It's brilliant. That book is insanely good. They're just such beautiful books. In fact, there is, for those of you, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who are really looking forward to the Hedonites next month. I know I am. Bloody hell, I'm just sort of like anticipating. Yeah. It is kind of like the Rocky Horror Picture Show anticipation. You know, it's just I can't wait. I cannot wait. Read the Liber Chaotica Slaanesh. It's so good. There's actually an essay in there, you know, by a Slaanesh cultist, by the Marquis del Manche.
Right.
Whoever's read their Marquis de Sade will know that name, by the way. And he describes the entire metaphysics of what chaos is. He's a chaotician. And he knows, like, he's a Slaanesh worshipper, but he knows what the gods are, and he knows how they work. So he knows that they're basically confections, that they are reflections of human emotion. But his argument is, look, we're all condemned to chaos anyway. If you die, it doesn't matter if you worship Sigmar. It doesn't matter if you worship, like, whatever one of the old gods of the old world was. Your soul is going to go to one of the chaos gods or another. So you may as well go to the one which is going to give you pleasure. It's going to allow you to enjoy it a little bit, you know?
Which isn't true in AOS now at this point, really, is it?
No.
Well, to a point.
Not to the same degree, though, is it?
No.
You see, this is how the state of play has changed. So now you have options, yeah?
None of them are very good options, but you do have options.
No, none of them. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, Nagash, that seems to be the best way to go. It's nice, peaceful. You know?
Yeah, but your individual will gets obliterated.
It depends if he wants to eat you or not, or if he's like, okay, you can go to one of the heavens I've created, or I'm just going to use you for a fuel for my war. Who knows?
Or like
but I'm not important. You know? You won't even notice me.
Yeah, but that's why you'd just be a skeleton.
Yeah, you'd just be consumed.
Or you'd be like a Snickers bar to him.
At the very least, the Chaos Gods do value their worshippers, you know? So if you are like a servant of Nurgle, for example, and you end up in the Garden of Nurgle, that's great. That's fabulous. If you're a servant of Khorne, and your soul ends up on the endless battlefield surrounding the Brass Citadel in Khorne's realm. Great. Wonderful. Slaanesh, you end up in the pleasure palace of Slaanesh, or in one of the 6 rings, the 6 circles surrounding his realm. You're like, great, wonderful. So there is an argument for chaos worship, in the mortal realms, as much as there was in the old world. It was stronger in the old world, because in the old world, all of the gods, apart from Sigmar, all of the gods were just adjuncts or aspects of the chaos powers. All of them were.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who you worshipped. So there was the god of death, wasn't there?
More.
He was Nurgle. He was an aspect of Nurgle.
Oh.
Yeah, there was nothing you could do.
Oh.
Cain was an aspect of Khorne. Hashut was an aspect of Khorne.
No.
Yeah, he was.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most intelligent argument I've ever had.
Metaphysically, he's an aspect of Khorne.
Yeah, it'd be a shard, right? Just with a bit more independence, kind of like a demon prince, or demon king.
Yeah.
Khorne doesn't have a big curly mustache.
But an aspect of him does.
That version does.
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense, to be honest.
Yeah, that version does.
Actually, no, it doesn't, because the Chaos Dwarfs had sorcerers. Khorne hates magic. Checkmate, George. Hashut was his own independent god.
I love it. No, according to the background, anyway, according to the stuff that's written by Games Workshop, he was Khorne, basically.
What do they
know? An aspect of Khorne. But in the mortal realms, I suppose in the mortal realms there is potential. As Marathai has demonstrated, you can become your own god.
Yeah, which is actually something I think we're going to start seeing happen. Maybe not full out celestial beings of light, but I think we're going to see a lot of, not a lot, but I think what we're going to see is we're going to see people ascend to godhood in some way, shape or form. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but do you think Teclis and Tyrion are going to be around for much longer?
Oh, Teclis, I think will, because of he's got.
Well, Teclis is already dead, so we don't need to talk too much about him. He's a ghost riding a cat
with big trousers.
Yeah, what the ghost has or the cat has.
Yes, both.
Yes, that's the answer. Yes.
My God, I want to see the next High Elven god just be a cat in big trousers.
So they merge.
Now someone needs to do
basically.
a meme of how does Tetlis's cat wear trousers?
Oh God!
Is it like this, or is it like this?
Can you imagine those like voluminous trousers, but for 4 legs?
Done. Your entire day would be spent trying to get them on.
I don't know why it's just occurred to me, but the only Chaos God who is clothed is Khorne. Technically, Slaanesh is as well, but in a tantalizing manner.
Yeah, it looks more naked because of the clothes that
I was going to say, because of the nature of Slaanesh, obviously,
Yeah.
Does Tzeentch not wear white robes?
Nope.
No, it's just a big floating pink horror.
Right, okay. Tzeentch has got Tzeentch is the most variable, so he appears differently for everyone who looks at him. But the most common portrayal, it's like Adam says, he looks like a big pink horror that's sitting cross-legged in the air.
Oh, that thing, yeah.
And he's got faces all over his body that twist and contort and transform, and he's got tendrils with faces on them all over him. Very disturbing looking Chaos God. And Nurgle is just a big old ball of pus and disease. He looks like he's a great unclean one. He's just a giant, great unclean one.
He's also just the friendliest.
Yeah, Nurgle is the friendliest god. If you want a god that genuinely cares, even Sigmar doesn't give a shit about his followers. He sees them as means to an end. They are expendable. Ultimately, he doesn't value them, except in terms of their use as instruments. Of war. Nurgle actually does genuinely care about his followers. He actually sees them as children or as family, and it is sincere. It's not it's not a confection. It is actually sincere. It's just also the kind of affection that you'd get from a parent who doesn't want their children to leave home.
Yeah.
You know, it's abusive, but not intentionally abusive, if that makes sense.
Overly protective.
Yeah.
To the point of abuse.
To the point of abuse. Yeah, exactly that. It's a kind of myopia that Nurgle worship prescribes. I mean, have you guys ever read about the psychology of Nurgle, which is in the Lost and the Damned?
Yes.
Amazing. I mean, that is the most... And again, the Liber Chaotica goes really deep into this, because, of course, it is, on the face of it, as Marius von Helscher describes, it's insanity. Why would you ever worship a god of despair and disease? It doesn't make any sense until you start to look at how it happens. It's generally the case that people don't start off worshipping Nurgle. They find themselves in situations where despair takes hold. So a plague will ravage them. They're starving. There's a famine or something like that. They find themselves in a situation where they feel like they can't get out. They're trapped, basically, in a particular set of circumstances. And after a while...
I can relate.
Right. I think, anyone in 2020 or 2021, I think, understands this psychology quite well.
We're all going to just follow Nurgle now.
But what happens in Nurgle worship is, rather than trying to find a way out of that situation, the human capacity for finding meaning in your own suffering. So rather than trying to find a way out of the situation or improve it, you find a kind of identity in it. And then you start psychologically reinforcing it in your own mind. It becomes like part of your identity. That's where Nurgle is born. That's where Nurgle worship is born, where you start to define by the misery, by the despair. And eventually, the way Nurgle's worship works is it twists your perceptions such that you actually start to see truth in it and beauty. And in the end, it becomes good. It becomes the measure of positivity and truth. That's why Nurgle's worshippers are generally quite happy.
Sounds very much like Mr. Bean to me.
But that's so complex, isn't it? It's such a complex psychology, and it refers to such a recognizable and real human state, that inclination to find meaning in one's suffering rather than do something to change it. It's brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. Slaanesh is the easiest. He's always been the easiest to define. It's obvious why anyone would want to worship Slaanesh, It's obvious why someone would want to worship Tzeentch even, just if it's just for power. But Nurgle, not so much. And I love how complex that psychology is. And that was there at the beginning. That was there right back in The Lost and the Damned.
There's I recently got hold of the 1991 Warhammer Armies book, and in that the way that they classify the Chaos Gods is just being these multifaceted, almost elemental's the wrong word, almost just like these things that didn't exist but do exist and have a huge amount of different entry levels to getting into them.
That's right.
That doesn't get into a huge amount of detail about it. And it's just occurred to me that The Lost and the Damned and the A Slave to Darkness came out for that third Ed Warhammer. So it almost feels like this weird evolution took place in 1990-91, where they try desperately to pin down what the Chaos Gods are and aren't, and then almost went a completely different direction and then have come back to it recently.
It's absolutely true. So like in The Lost and the Damned, when Nurgle is described, it's in its full complexity. So you get that whole notion of his followers being strangely joyous and jovial despite their conditions, or actually not even despite their conditions. They actually genuinely do take pleasure in being rotted and decayed and diseased, and they for the most part genuinely think they're doing a good thing when they spread those diseases and whatnot around. They think that they are liberating people, that they're showing them the truth, that they're introducing them to the inevitable. There's no point in denying entropy because it's going to happen anyway. So why not take joy in it? Why not take pleasure in it? And that's what Nurgle offers. And in that regard, I can kind of understand. If your lot is so bad, if you've got no choice, crying out into the void. I mean, that's what happened to Mortarion, of course. This is what happened to the Death Guard. They were becalmed in the warp on their way to Terra to take part in the Horus Heresy. And then the Destroyer Plague hit. And they couldn't do anything. You know, this legion of space marines who defined themselves by their fortitude, by being able to endure the kinds of toxic, desolate environments that even other space marines couldn't handle. Suddenly, for the first time, they feel pain. Suddenly, for the first time, there's something they can't endure. There's something they can't fight off. And the destroyer plague is the worst thing, because it's got like the symptoms of every disease imaginable, but you can't die from it. It keeps you alive and suffering, and there's no way out. I mean, can you even begin to conceive of that? And that's when Mortarion as well. Mortarion himself becomes prey to it. So a Primarch who has never known pain before, has never understood what suffering is, suddenly for the first time feels it and can't escape from it. And it's at that extremist when he calls out into the warp, "Save me, save my sons." That's when Nurgle is there. That's where Nurgle is to answer, to sort of bring him into the fold, you know? And as the centuries have gone on, it hasn't become a matter of coercion. It's become a blessing. It's like, this was inevitable anyway. We started down this path and we've always been on the way to this, you know? This is what we are. And Grandfather Nurgle was there to take us to his bosom, you know? It's so cool the way the perceptions twist and the way the psychology works for Nurgle. He's definitely, like, psychologically the most complex of the Chaos powers.
Yeah. I always find it weird when it changes from Father Nurgle to Grandfather Nurgle.
Right.
Because that change does actually take place at one point, and it's bizarre that it happens. And I would love to know what the decision was. Was it just a throwaway line and someone liked it so much that they kept it? Or...
I think it's probably just that Grandfather is more avuncular, isn't it?
Yeah.
Father's got kind of a stern notation to it, doesn't it? Like a stern significance, you know, which Nurgle doesn't have. He's not a stern sort of patriarchal type. He's jovial and happy. He's the grandfather that you could get away with being a bit naughty with, you know, having a bit of a laugh with, yeah.
There's an interesting thing actually, just because I mentioned the Warhammer Armies book, which I haven't read all the way through yet because
right.
But oh my god, it was like just walking through nostalgia. It was beautiful. But there's a little thing that I've noticed in there which I've never come across before, or at least not in my memory. Have either of you two ever heard of the theory that 40k exists on a box in a wizard's shelf in the old world?
I've heard something along. I mean, there was a time when the Warhammer world was that. When it was just like they never came out and said it, but there was some heavy implication that what the Warhammer world was this little pocket dimension where the old ones were experimenting with genetics and with physics, and that's why you get similar species and races and whatnot in the 40k universe. That was the going theory once upon a time, and there was it almost seemed at one time as though the writers were leaning into that.
Yes.
Once upon a time.
They did with the end times, didn't they? They found an Eldar ship.
They found an Eldar ship. Well, do you remember there was a campaign right sort of not towards the end, but sort of like in the mid-1990s, where it was a campaign set in the old world, and at the end, they introduced in White Dwarf all of the armies that did the best, got this new selection of war gear they could choose from. And they described them in fantasy terms, but they were a power fist, a plasma gun, a flamer, a power sword, a lightning claw. So,
I do remember that.
There has in the past been some overlap. Well, I mean, like back in the ROC days, you could take everything you could take in fantasy battle, you could take in Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
Everything. You could in Chaos armies, you could have chimeras, you could have dragons, you could have Chaos Knights for God's sake. You could have Chaos Warriors, Beastmen, and that even carried over to Second Ed. Do you remember in the Second Ed Chaos Codex, there was an appendix army list for Demon World armies?
That's right.
And the Demon World army, all that was, you could take everything from what was then the Chaos list in Warhammer in 40k. Chaos Knights, Trolls, Beastmen, Dragon Ogres, all of that shit you could take in 40k.
Right, so when are we going to get to Codex Dragon Ogres? Come on.
Friggin' hell, I mean...
Codex Horse. I want Codex Horse.
Yeah.
Just one horse or many horses?
Just one horse.
This was back
one
in
horse.
Like this was back in the days when you could take Chaos Centaurs as well, you know.
Yep.
Before they turned them into Centaurs.
Centaurs.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as good as Chaos Centaur.
No, Chaos Centaurs were fun, but of course they can't copyright Centaurs, so they had to turn them into Centaurs.
Yeah, when they turned them into Centaurs, less nipples. Very upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
Ow.
Mm-hmm. Less mohawks as well. I remember,
which really upsets me.
The Chaos Centaurs had these massive, wild, punkish mohawks for some reason, and they were always drunk.
Yeah, that's true.
They were always drunk. But yeah, I mean, there's so much change. I mean, you were talking earlier, Adam, about how there was the shift at one point from the sort of avuncular nature of Nurgle, you know, that ambiguity, to where he was just like evil chaos god.
Yeah.
And that did happen, didn't it? That happened when the Second Ed Chaos Codex came out.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the description of Nurgle in there, he's just the Lord of Disease and Entropy, and his followers are not happy or jovial. They're just evil. They're just there to spread disease, and they are like malevolent and bitter and unpleasant. And that lasted for ages. That portrayal of Nurgle lasted for ages and ages and ages.
Most of the 90s,
yeah. It wasn't until well late on, I mean, well into the 2000s, when they started to look back at the more complex portrayal of Nurgle, like as the elemental counterpoint to the forces of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And but also as a god of life, as well as a god of despair and disease and death. When they reintroduced the notion of him as a nature god, where it's like a cycle of Nurgle. That was reintroduced in 2000, and it was then that they also started to reintroduce the notion of his followers actually being quite happy and jovial and fun.
It's weird, isn't it? Because when you think of Nurgle as it stood in like 4th Ed Warhammer and 2nd Ed 40k, you don't ever really see much of the way of Nurgle's manse or Nurgle's garden.
That didn't exist back then.
Well, it did. It predates it.
It did,
Nurgle's
but it wasn't
garden
like
is like way back in Realm
it
of
was
Chaos.
It was in the Realms of Chaos, but it was like a mention and a picture. There was no detail about it. There was no description of what it was. And the other Chaos powers, their realms weren't even described.
No.
So there was nothing about the 6 Circles of Slaanesh. There was nothing about the Citadel of Khorne. There was nothing about the Crystal Library of Tzeentch. None of that existed. It was all it was very vague back then.
I want to say that it's not until 4th Ed Warhammer that Tzeentch actually got any kind of mention of a realm.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's what Silver Tower was, wasn't it? It was.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Before the Silver Tower became, I think, did Silver Tower? Yeah, the Silver Towers then turned up in Epic.
That's right. They were actually physical things. They were demon engines essentially that floated around. Yeah. No, there wasn't any description of that kind of thing. There were a few little tidbits, like in Slaves to Darkness. There's a talk of the Vale of Creatures, which is one of Slaanesh's the areas in Slaanesh's realm, but. There's very little else. I think there may be mention of the Palace of Slaanesh, but it is only a mention. There's no overt description of the realms of the Chaos powers back then.
Oh, where is it that it describes the pulsating pleasure palace of Slaanesh?
I think that's when it wasn't until in the 2000s when they really reinvented Chaos, and they really went they started to do the separate books for demons, which, by the way, I don't mind the notion of them having a separate book, but the way they separated them from everything else I hated. I absolutely loathed.
Yeah. No,
but one of the good things that happened then was you actually got more background about the individual demons and about the realms of the Chaos powers and everything. And that was actually kind of interesting. So they reinvented the way Chaos works then. So they actually started to refer back to ancient mythological influences.
Yeah.
So the Chaos powers were not only these Lovecraftian entities of evil, they were also classic elemental powers as well. So Slaanesh wasn't just Slaanesh; it had elements of Dionysus in it, and Bacchus, and these gods of plenty. Nurgle again became suffused with these nature gods, these parallels with pre-existing nature gods.
Well, the sheer amount of Celtic mythology that Nurgle gobbled up in order to become the Nurgle that we know now. Is unreal.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, look at there is he is physically. I mean, the name Nurgle is actually an old god. It's actually Nergal. It's an old Sumerian god.
Yeah.
But the aspect of Nurgle is this rotted, decaying thing. He's the earth power from Celtic mythology that resides in the Cauldron of Plenty, the son of the crone goddess. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he is essentially described as this eternally rotting, decayed sort of lord of disease and whatnot. That's what Nurgle is based on, essentially.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. I remember Senarath, but he's the god of the dead.
After like it's one of the many mythological influences that goes into Nurgle and
slur. It's one of the slurs. I can't remember now.
Yeah, can't remember off the top of my head.
Slur August, something like that.
Yeah, but the aspects and the imagery are all there. And funnily enough, like Nurgle, that god isn't necessarily portrayed as a negative thing.
No, it's
he just embodies like a particular cycle of life, which is, of course, the fact that all things are prone to entropy. All things rot and become fertilizer and soil for other forms of life. That's kind of what Nurgle embodies too.
No, I'm not saying that Andy's going to agree with me on this one, but when?
What do you mean when?
When do we all become fertilizer?
For some sooner, some later.
How very Zechian of you.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it is fascinating, isn't it? There's all this stuff that is ladled onto Nurgle as the years go on. And also stuff that's resurrected from when he was originally portrayed. And now, of course, in 9th Ed and the whatever edition of AOS we're on, which is kind of 2.5, isn't it?
Yeah.
They are in full-flown complexity now. All of those aspects are there, not only in the background, but in the miniatures and the rules and everything.
Mm-hmm. I find it fascinating that the difference between Nurgle in AOS and the Nurgle in 40k is actually quite large. The Nurgle in AOS is much more of a personality, as well as being a giant force of decay and rebirth, whilst the Nurgle that's in 40k is a much stronger need, an urge almost.
He's more distant, isn't he? And he's more abstract.
He's more abstract, but his followers have more of a concrete. Is need the right word? I don't think it is.
Like a drive.
Drive would probably be a good word for it. The followers of Nurgle in 40k seem to have a much more of a larger scope. Whilst the Nurgle followers in AOS have more of a we do as Nurgle wills.
Yeah, I imagine
and I think that's a really interesting take on it.
That is fascinating, and that may be just due to the nature of the settings, of course. I mean, in 40k, it's the plan, like the intentions of Nurgle's followers are universal.
Yes.
They intend. I mean, it's something that has become much more emphasized in the new Death Guard Codex, more so even than like the 8th Ed one, which was, by the way, spectacular. It was the first time the Death Guard had really got their own real proper army list, whereas up until that point they were really forced to take a much smaller seat as part of the wider Chaos forces, and so they couldn't really be explored to the same degree or in a way that actually worked for them. When they got their own army list, suddenly you could do all this stuff with them. Suddenly you could actually explore all of these different aspects in the way they work. You could actually talk about what they want. What is the desire of the Nurgle cults out there in the universe? And of course, it's actually kind of various. Okay, they're unified by their desire to do Nurgle's will and to spread his blessings and all that kind of thing. But what the 8th Ed Codex and certainly the 9th Ed Codex have crystallized is the notion that Nurgle worship is so various. And it has so many different manifestations. So within the Death Guard, you've got the Vectoria, which are like the armies of the Death Guard, and they're massive. They're absolutely huge. They are bigger than Space Marine chapters. In fact, they actually incorporate the equivalent of multiple Space Marine chapters within them. So the Death Guard are huge. They are like the Space Marine legions used to be back in the days of the Great Crusade.
So, out of all the
That's what
Chaos
they're like.
Marines, do the Death Guard have the largest amount of bodies?
No, the largest amount of bodies is the Black Legion.
Okay.
But the Death Guard are probably second in that regard, and they also, this is something that's new with the Ninth Ed Codex, by the way, and it's only a little throwaway line, they're the most organized of the Chaos Legions.
Right.
Because they have central authority, which is obviously Mortarion and the Plague Planet, and they are organized. So they are all, despite the various manifestations of Nurgle that they demonstrate, they are all following a particular plan. They're all doing something that relates to the wider purpose, which is, of course, bizarrely utopian. It's so weird. This was in the 8th Ed Codex, but it really wasn't as emphasized as it now is in the 9th Ed Codex. They've got a real agenda for the universe. They actually want to see the material universe turned into this garden of Nurgle's blessings. They want to spread it far and wide. They want to see the sentient species of the universe enlightened, if you like, and brought into the fold. They don't necessarily want to destroy everything, which is what they used to have. That was their modus operandi. That was really their agenda before. Let everything rot and decay and be destroyed. That's not what they want anymore. They are actually manifesting the cycle of Nurgle. So yeah, they are going to try and rot and destroy everything, but then they're also going to cultivate. They're going to turn the worlds, the systems, the planets they conquer into these little plague planets, into these little Edens of Nurgle, if you like, these little gardens of Nurgle. It's kind of cool. There is a utopianism. Okay, it's bleak and it's dark and it's twisted, but there's a kind of weird utopianism to the Death Guard, which I love. The fact that, ostensibly the bad guys have got this vision of tomorrow. I kind of love that. And it manifests differently between different Vectoria. So you've got some Vectoria who buy into that fully. And when they go to war, they're not solemn. They're not sort of silent and plodding and moaning and wheezing. They're joyous. They're kind of singing hymns to Nurgle, and they're welcoming. They're sort of no, don't run, don't fight us. We are here to spread the beneficence, And that's brilliant, isn't it?
That is absolutely wonderful.
But you've also got the other ones as well. So the other Vectoria who emphasize the despair aspect of Nurgle, and they hate themselves. They hate themselves for their weakness and for the fact that they are prey to all of these diseases and whatnot, but they can't do anything about it. And the reason they continue fighting is out of bitterness. It's because if they can bring the rest of the universe down to their level, then maybe they won't be so shameful, Which is, there's a wonderful contrast, you see, which you couldn't get before. Before the Chaos Powers were split up into their own books, which is the only way to do it, by the way. It's the only way to do them justice.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's too much variation. Even within this one army that's dedicated to one chaos power, there's just too much variation. I mean, this book, I've got the big 50 quid version here, which I just had to get because it's I've just got such a thing for the Death Guard. As I said before we came on air, I've got a real soft spot for the Death Guard. They were the first Chaos Force I collected way back when, back in Second Ed, You remember the old metal Plague Marines from back then that had the World War I helmets and the rebreathers and whatnot?
Oh, yeah, I remember them.
I had so many of them. I loved them so much. Death Guard was so much fun back then, but nothing compared to what they are now. But you've got all of these rules for different Vectoria, and each of the Vectoria has their own disease that they carry that defines the way they look, but also the way they're organized and the way they operate. So you've got the Wretched, and the Wretched are a Vectoria that have the Eta Plague, the virus that's used by the Imperium to virus bomb worlds.
Yeah.
That's what they manifest. That's what they've got.
Okay.
How cool. They're the manifestation of that, and they have rules that relate to that. They have the Eta Plague contagion. How cool is that?
How does that work on the battlefield?
Well, basically, it affects enemy. They've got this special rule called contagions, basically, which they've never had before. Bizarrely, despite the fact that they've always been diseased. They've never actually given diseases to the enemy before. Now they do. So when enemy units are within a particular range of a unit that has the contagion rule, which is basically everything in the army, then they start to experience debilitating effects, depending on what disease the unit has.
Does it depend on what they are as well? Because I would imagine, like, if you were going to give things diseases like Tyranids or like Necrons, it would work very differently from giving diseases to like a human.
They've
faction.
worded it very cannily. So that each of the diseases, there's always a description of how it affects, like, they're not just normal diseases, they're demonic diseases. So they can affect metal and systems as much as they can affect biology. There's always very careful wording where, just so they don't have to go nuts with, like, oh, it affects a Necron like this, or it affects everyone the same, basically.
Okay.
So you get the basic contagion rule. If it escalates as the battle goes on, so in the first battle round you have to be really close for the contagion to take effect, but in the second battle round that escalates and the range gets wider and wider and wider, and the basic contagion rule is a -1 toughness affliction. So all Plague Marines, all Death Guard have got that. Then you've also got the specific diseases from the Vectoria, which stack with that. It's insane. They're so cool. Right? It's mad. That -1 toughness thing is a bastard in and of itself. It's evil. Imagine. It's evil, that is. I mean, armies like Space Marines are actually going to fall like wheat to these guys. Because one of their principal benefits, their toughness, is gone. The Necrons that rely on a certain durability, it's not there anymore. And then you look at armies then you look at enemies like the Tyranids or the Eldari that don't have high toughness. They're going to be toughness 2 for the most part against these guys, if they're within range of the contagion. How mad is that?
I suppose with things like the Tyranids and the Eldari, they'll probably write something that'll give them a boost to whatever they're lacking.
One would hope so.
One would have to imagine.
I mean, the Tyranids, they can rely on numbers because they're a horde army, so it doesn't matter so much. The Eldari, not so much.
No, they rely on speed, don't they?
They rely on speed, so there's going to have to be something. Because I'm telling you, the Death Guard, having read through, and I've read it cover to cover now, by the way, they are, when the tournament scene starts getting up again, they're going to feature heavily. Because if this is an indication of what Chaos is going to be like in 9th Ed, we're in for some good times. Because this is probably the best Chaos Codex, rules-wise, that's been for years. The Death Guard there's so many little synergies, there's so many little tricks you can pull with this army that are really naughty and really nasty, and your enemy isn't going to be expecting them. Everything works with everything else. There's all these little, like, war gear choices, diseases, warlord traits, psychic powers that all work together in synergy with one another. So suddenly your enemy's strong points are not going to be anymore. It's absolutely brilliant. And on top of that, they've gone, you know how with the Necron Codex, they went really hard with the role-playing element.
Yes.
They've done that here as well. So not only have you got the diseases, there's also this rule that allows you can infect the weapons of your characters with particular diseases. And they stack on top of relics. Relics are a separate thing. They're called deadly pathogens, right? And you basically can just choose which of these rules that you apply to the weapon in question. And each one has a different effect. It's just amazing. It's amazing. They've gone hard on, like, right, we want you to create your own Death Guard army. We want your characters to be completely different from everyone else's. We want you to model them differently. We want you to play differently. We want you to paint them differently. And this is before you even get into the Crusade section. And I'm telling you, the Crusade section, all of the Crusade sections of the codices thus far have been gold. They've been absolutely gold. This one is a step up. This one's a step up. You've got this rule that allows you to make your own diseases. In the Crusade rules, there is this section. Not only is there a new section for Chaos boons, so you can roll like in the old Realms of Chaos days. There's a die 33 table that allows you to roll mutations and things and Chaos blessings. There's that. There's also the spreaders of disease, the virulence points rule, and what you can do, you can create and assign a custom plague to your plague marines. So you decide on the vector of transmission, which is from a die 6 table. You decide on the type of infection, which is from a die 6 table. And then you decide on what factors cause the disease to burn out, the terminus. So how does it end up? And you can mix and match all of these different elements to create your own custom disease for your Death Guard Victoria.
Okay.
Absolutely amazing. So technically, your Victorium is going to be different from everybody else's. No two are going to be quite alike.
That's amazing.
Even the diseases that they spread are going to be different. They're going to spread, like, the different vectors are how it spreads. So you've got one called weeping, basically. So the plague carrier seeps with disease and filth. So you have to be within range of them. You have to get close to them for that one to take effect.
Yeah.
You've got another one, which is hemorrhaging. And in that instance, the diseased matter is bursting out of them. So it's when you hit them and it spatters on the enemy. That's how it infects them.
So it's an anti-melee combat choice, basically.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The amount of thought that's gone into this codex. Honestly, it is the best Chaos Codex that's been out for years. Absolutely
sounds
years.
Incredible.
I was not expecting some of the stuff in here, I've got to say. I was not expecting the custom diseases. That was a complete, like, I still can't get over how good it is. I still can't get over. Even the Lost and the Damned didn't allow you to do that.
No.
So yeah, that is. Also, do you remember what we were talking about where we said like, there's definitely going to be a system whereby you can carry a champion through from their mortal state to demonhood.
Yeah.
That's in here. The Path to Glory is in here.
Oh dear God! Right. Okay.
It's mad. Honestly,
it
is absolutely crazy. And then there's just like the army list. The base army list in and of itself it's tight. You know how Chaos Forces for like years have had this problem where they haven't been quite fully fleshed out. They haven't been quite realized properly.
Yeah.
This one fixes all those problems. It fixes them all. Everything works. Everything works in and of itself, but it also works as part of the wider army. They've considered where everything fits and how it works in conjunction with everything else. It's probably the most synergistic Chaos Force you can field at the moment. I can't get over how good it is. I can't get over how good it is.
Just insane.
Yeah.
Completely and utterly way beyond what they had for anything.
Yeah. If this is how Chaos is going to be in 9th Ed, I'm going to be very happy. I mean, if this is how like the core Chaos Codex is going to manifest, and also how the Thousand Suns are going to manifest, then it's going to be the best time Chaos has had in 40k for a long, long time. I can tell you.
Yeah.
Mortarion, they've never got the Chaos Primarchs right in rules terms, have they? They've always been a bit too fragile. They've always not done what they're supposed to do. He's a must-take now.
Really?
Mortarion is a must-take. Well, you know all those diseases I was talking about before that come with the different Victoria? He's got most of them. He's got a lot of them, and to just to emphasize it, you can add on another one. You could choose another to add on to him, so you can tailor him for whatever battlefield role you want. Yeah.
Okay.
He's evil. He's a monster. He's an absolute monster. If you want something that can take down the Silent King, or like the big monsters from the Necron Force, Mortarion is it.
Right.
He's a beat stick. He's a beat stick. You just put him on the battlefield and you chuck him at the enemy, and he will reap through almost anything you can chuck him at. He's a nightmare. Mortarion is now. I hope. I mean, fingers crossed. Oh, please carry that over for Magnus.
I mean, they really should. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't.
No. If they've paid this much attention to making Mortarion what he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Then I don't see why not. And it's a simple fix, really. They've just upped his stats a little bit. They've made him a bit more survivable, and they've made him nastier. So he's gonna take down most things within range, basically. And some things that aren't, just because he's got diseases floating around him, you know?
See, I'm reminded of way back when the old Realm of Chaos D1000 tables, where you created your characters and your monsters and your troops and all that type of thing. And I remember there was a throwaway line, and I think there was one miniature for it, and it was a Plague Marine whose body had decayed, and there was just basically a skeleton floating around inside the armor.
Nice.
So there was no like gooey bits. It was all just rust and decay, with bits of bone sticking out.
Yep.
Now I'm wondering, is that now a possibility?
Yes, it is. There is a
answer to that one then.
Easy answer. Yeah, there's a Victoria called the Weeping Legion, which is more or less that.
Okay.
It's more or less that, and there's rules for it. So it's like,
Yeah, fair enough.
It's mad. There's even, and Adam, I didn't tell you this because I thought I knew you'd love it. Mm-hmm. There's a Nurgle version of Precipice.
Right.
So there's a place in the material universe where a particular Victoria called the Venom Mariners, who are basically, they're like the pirates of the Death Guard.
Right.
And they've set up a Death Guard commune amongst these planets that they've conquered. And it's where all of the worshippers of Nurgle, all of the different cults, all of the different Victoria meet, and they chat and they share like news of what's going on in the wider universe, and they share their revelations of new diseases that they've concocted. And it talks about how there are even like factories and towns and civilizations dedicated to Nurgle in this cluster of worlds that they've created.
Oh, good God, that's awesome.
And it's brilliant. It's just, honestly, the stuff in this codex is mad.
So what you're saying is that when we talked to him a couple of months ago now, I think it was, about why can't we have just a little box set full of Imperial citizens that you just put together for various reasons. So it says we need that, and then a Nurgle upgrade set, so you could just have Nurgle citizens.
Then a Nurgle one, because there are now Nurgle citizens. There is actually Nurgle civilizations out there.
Fuck!
Right. I mean, this is indicative of what I was talking about earlier. They've moved them on. They've actually evolved their status in the universe and their agendas. It's not just about it's not like Abaddon, where it's like destroy everything, just rip everything apart. That's Abaddon's agenda, just destroy everything. Yeah. It's not that, not for Mortarion and not for the Death Guard. That's not what they want anymore. Okay, they do want to render everything down, but they want to build something back. They want to create their Nurgle utopia.
Yeah, that's really singing my tune.
It's great, isn't it? It's absolutely brilliant. I mean,
and this is where Andy just goes, "Hey, I have some Death Guard."
I mean, they're just sitting in my cupboard.
It's I'm amazed at this book. I'm amazed at the amount of background in it. I'm amazed at how far they've taken it and how different everything is. It's like the watchword was like, right, we can't make them too narrow.
Yeah.
Because that's the danger with any of the cult legions, obviously. I mean, it's difficult to do, isn't it? To introduce variety into them. But that's bloody hell. That's what they've done. That's what the watchword was with these guys. I mean, purely on a technical level, things like demon engines are now not only usable, some of them are absolutely brilliant,
Yeah.
You know, they've just made little They've listened to the complaints people have had, and they've just fixed the problems. You know, it's fantastic. It's absolutely
It'll be
fantastic.
interesting to see what they do for the next edition, if they'll have to roll some of the rules back, because you know that's what they do with rules and game changes and stuff. If something becomes too powerful, they have to pull things back a little bit and maybe not make them quite as good, because you talked about the whole the disease effectively covering the entire battlefield. I think the idea sounds interesting and good, but I also think it sounds incredibly overpowered, that the longer it goes on, the more powerful it becomes.
I can see it having that potential. I mean,
because all you need to do to win is potentially just stall.
Yeah,
if you just stall the enemy and hide, you can just start covering unless there's obviously a thing you need to rush for an objective.
I mean, the Death Guard are also very good at that, obviously, because they're really resilient. I mean, the thing that limits that is these are going to be small armies. You're not going to have...
they're elite force, kind of like the Thousand Suns.
Oh, heavily. I mean, heavily. Your basic troops choices, your Plague Marines, they're better than most armies' elites choices. They're one of the best basic troop choices in the game right now, because you can do anything with them. They can be tailored to be anything, but they're also very, very, very small. The points costs are prohibitive, as you can imagine. They're going to do the business. Whatever you chuck them at, whatever you want them to do, they're going to do the business, but they're also very finite. So that's going to be the weakness for the Death Guard, definitely. You're not going to have as many bodies on the battlefield as most armies. But that said, those bodies you've got are going to absolutely massacre anything that comes near them. Anything. Right. And that goes double, like the elite shock troops, the Death Shroud, you know, the guys with the scythes, the Terminators that are Mortarion's sort of agents amongst the Death Guard.
Mortarion's favourite children.
They are the best Terminators in the game. Without ambiguity. They're mad. They're crazy. The amount of damage they can put out. Also, they've got an ability which it adds 3 inches to the contagion range of all contagion abilities. So they're crazy. Toughness 5, 3 wound, 4 attack Terminators with a 4+ invulnerable save. That add 3 inches to their contagion range. Yeah, that can teleport.
As you do.
They're mad. The Death Shroud are... You basically teleport them close to the enemy, charge them in, and they will kill anything. Almost anything. There's hardly anything in the game that can go one-on-one with them.
So what's the counter to them?
Sorry, say again, Andy.
What's the counter to them?
Shoot them. They don't really have... They don't have long-range weapons, so to use them, you've got to get close.
So is there a limitation to the teleport? Because if you see they can just teleport and get into combat. Oh, there is a charge.
Yeah, they can only teleport within 9 inches, so they can't teleport one turn then charge the next.
Okay, so the idea is to use your longest range stuff on them.
Yeah, that's
kind of whittle them down.
That's exactly it. And also, there's not many per unit. There's only like 2 to 5 per unit, and that's it. That's all you get. But that said, they're monsters. Their weapon skill is the same as most characters. And they're all armed with Man Reapers. The same weapon that Typhus has got.
So then the big question I have to ask here is, what's their weaknesses?
It's the fact that there are not many of them. You're not going to get many of these guys per army. You're going to get one unit and it's going to be small. So they're kind of one shot, you know? They've got to work. They've got to work. When you use them, they've got to work. Otherwise, you've got a big point sink there. And when they're dead, that's a lot of your army, you know, because there are a lot of points, these guys.
Yeah.
But
so
if they're
really expensive.
Yeah, but if they do get into combat, they're going to eat through a flank of the enemy army. And they're just going to keep doing it until you've got rid of them. Because they're evil. I mean, they are absolutely evil, these things.
I like how there's a. I can almost hear the joy and glory in your voice when you say that. They're evil.
I mean, yeah, they're great. I mean, my only problem with them is I want the other Chaos Forces to have not the same, but to have the same variety. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
when we have the Thousand Sons, I would like them to have multiple different types of Terminators as well that are different to these guys, but have similar impact. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just having the Scarab Occult, which are good, the Scarab Occult are great, maybe a unit of Sorcerer Terminators. I mean, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have a cabal, like an elite cabal of exalted sorcerer terminators in a Thousand Sons army? That makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
It does. The thing I'm thinking at the moment is every Chaos Force going to get this kind of overhaul? I mean, I hope they do. I really do.
That's my fear. That's my sincere fear. I mean, clearly the death. This has been a passion project. It's clear the design studio, they've looked at the Death Guard and said, we love these guys, we love them, we want them to have the best of everything, and they've thrown it at them. They've just thrown it at them. The fact they've done the Death Guard first gives me hope, because it means that hopefully the lessons they've learned from this codex will carry over. And it also means they're clearly putting consideration into it. So the reason they've done the Death Guard first is because their miniatures range is done. They don't have to fill in any of the gaps, you know. I mean, they've introduced a couple of new things. The wonderful bit of scenery, the miasmic malignifier, which is that big furnace thing, by the way.
What a name.
Yeah.
What a wonderful name.
Oh, they're great. They're really good fun. You know, they're not built, they're seeded. They grow on a world.
Oh, yeah.
Like buboes. Like, they grow and they fester and they pump toxins and disease into the atmosphere. They're a lot of fun. And again, they're going to add to the survivability and just the sheer synergy of this army. They work so well. They work so well. It's impressive stuff. But given that the Death Guard have got the miasmic malignifier, I cannot think that the Thousand Sons won't have something, their own bit of scenery. Whatever that will be, like a shard of the Crystal Towers or something.
I was just thinking it would just be a big giant crystal coming out with a little dude sitting in the top of it.
That's what I would think. Some sort of like psychic magnifier.
Yeah.
Something.
You want to
like
make your
that.
own Thousand Sun thing? All right. Get your vacuum cleaner, vacuum the floor, tip it out onto the table, and call it the winds of the rubric as you vote in and they start coughing.
Yeah, just a pile of dust.
Yeah.
Oh, that hurts. Oh, that hurts. Ouch.
It hurt them more, I think.
Oh, God. I mean, the enemies of the Thousand Sons have never thought of that, have they? Forget the bolters. Equip everyone with vacuum cleaners.
Pocket sand. Surprise.
The problem is the Empire tried that once. The Imperium went, right, if we get a load of vacuum cleaners, and why are the Space Wolves running away?
Oh, my God, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it makes me think the reason they've done the Death Guard first is because they've looked at the other Chaos Forces and thought, well, they all have gaps in their miniatures range. We're going to have to introduce new stuff into them. And that makes me think they're considering every release as they go.
Well, I would imagine the Thousand Sons will be next because they've got most of their range done for the most part.
They do, but here's another big change, which is really surprising. There are no demons in this book.
Oh, interesting.
How interesting is that? No demons.
Do you think that might mean we get another Demons of 40k book at some point?
There is going to be a new Demons book, and there are no summoning rules in this book. So my guess is the demons are all going to be in one book, and the summoning rules are going to be in that book. But if that's true, then the Thousand Sons are going to have loads of new units, and I mean loads.
Yeah.
Because
they're very lacking.
Yes, they plugged a lot of the gaps in the Thousand Sons army list with demons. So they're going to have to introduce loads of new stuff. The entire fast attack section was almost all demons.
So what do you think's easier to do? Do you think it's easier to fill out the range of Khorne, or do you think it's easier to fill out the range of Tzeentch for
Tzeentch, because Tzeentch has
still easier.
They've had a release, you know. At the very least, they've had a release. So you have got you've got your Thousand Sons, you've got your Zarngor, you've got your Scarab Occult Terminators, you've got your Exalted Sorcerers. So there are things to add in, you know, and it's easy to adapt them to make them parts of other areas. So, like, for example, in the fast attack section, why aren't there disc riding Sorcerers of Tzeentch?
God, yeah, from back in the day.
Right.
Yeah, they used to be.
Why don't they just put them in the fast attack section? That's great. I'd go for that. I'd be quite happy with that. There need to be Tzeentch specific demon engines.
Yeah,
Definitely.
agreed.
Definitely. And I'm quietly hoping that will probably be the case because of the amount of attention the Death Guard have had. You know?
It's going to be so annoying if they just bring out a Thousand Sons Codex and it's just the last one again.
I will be very frustrated if that's the case. I'll be very upset, actually, because at the moment, I'll be honest, I expect more from New Games Workshop.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one.
I expect more. For the mainstream Chaos Space Marine Codex, like the Undivided one, my guess is it's going to be like the Space Marine Codex. So you're going to get your core codex, then you're going to get supplements for each of the Undivided legions. And I also think this time round, you're not going to get the World Eaters in it, and I don't think you're going to get the Emperor's Children in it.
You think they're going to be siphoned off to the Slaanesh and their own stuff and have their own books?
They're going to have their own books. I think
that
it's
would make sense.
Very likely this time round they're going to have their own books, because you can't do them justice.
I mean, I think it's guaranteed that Slaanesh and the Emperor's Children will. It would be ridiculous with the amount of hints we've had over the years for their own force. It'd be weird for them to be a supplement at this point.
It would be very strange. The fact that like the cult legions clearly do so well when they make their own codices for them.
Yeah.
You know, and people go nuts for them. The Death Guard Codex, people have gone mental for it. Have you seen the internet?
Unfortunately, yes.
This is one of the first times where there's been a Chaos release, and despite the griping that came about before it was released, once the Codex was released, almost everyone was unanimous. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. They've done it. They've done the best Chaos Codex for donkey's years here.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people. I've seen people who don't even play 40k trying to get hold of a copy of the book just to read it.
It's really good. I mean, it just drips with atmosphere. It's a great book. I've read it several times now, and it's fun. There's
a reason that you know it's been good, because for a couple of days there, it was out of stock.
Right, yeah. It's a fun book to read, and you know what else? You know, I stopped messing about with the army lists for Chaos Armies because it was making me sad, basically. Yeah. The fact that you couldn't put together a workable Chaos Army list equivalent to like an Imperial Space Marine army list or whatever. This one, oh my god, you can just have fun like putting stuff together and seeing how it works and seeing like how it matches up with other Vectoria. It's amazing fun. I love it. It's a great codex. I'm just over the moon with it.
It certainly sounds that way. I mean, after an hour, I feel that you still haven't actually scratched the surface of what that book can do.
Nowhere close. There's so much. I mean, here's another fun thing you can do. They've introduced this rule whereby you can only have one of the Chaos Lord miniatures in your army, right? Because obviously the followers of Chaos get a little bit competitive.
Yeah,
about that
rambunctious.
Sort of thing. So that makes perfect sense. I'm totally into that. I think that is a really cool thing. But they've also introduced this rule whereby, you know, the elite characters that they introduced in the 8th edition codex. So your Tallyman, your Biologist Putrefier, all of those guys. You can take 3 of them in one elite slot. They're called the Fetid Virion.
Uh-huh.
So you can actually have an army based around them, if you want, which would be the way I'd do it for me, because I love those characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love them to bits. So with the elite slots in a normal like battalion, you could have like 9 of them if you really wanted.
Jesus Christ.
And you could have like different like little cults of them. It'd be so much fun. So much bloody fun. It's ridiculous. The fun in this codex it's insane. That seems to have been another one of the watchwords. It's like fun and variety.
Yeah.
I hate those things.
Right. Who likes that, eh? Who likes that? You know what's really nice as well? For at long last to see a Chaos Space Marine army list that's at least as good as the Imperial army lists.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking before when you were talking, that what you sounds like there is that they've taken what they keep doing to the Space Marines and they've adapted it to make it work for another army at long last.
At long last. Well, now at long last you've got a Chaos army that's at least equivalent to a Primaris army.
Yeah.
You know, Plague Marines can go toe-to-toe and even better with most Primaris units and come out on top. Which is nice.
Yeah.
Well, they've all got 2 wounds now. Even your basic troops have got 2 wounds, so they are bastards. They're hard to shift.
So what I'm thinking about here is not so much how it's going to work against other Chaos armies, but how is that going to work with some of the Xenos races when they start hitting?
Yes.
So if you're going to put that much variation on the Death Guard, what's it going to look like for the Orcs, or what's it going to look like, more importantly, for the Tyranids?
Right. Well,
an army that should be heavily mutable, but has a tendency to get really stagnant or really fast.
It's true. Well, if the Necron Codex is any indication, they're going to be fine. Yeah. Because the Necron Codex does that beautifully. I mean, that's another thing as well. I get the feeling, because I've got all the codices that have been released thus far, I've got a feeling, looking at them in their entirety, there has been much more of a, okay, let's sit down and think about this. There's a plan, like a wider plan, and there's a template for the codices. So it's not like, you know how in previous versions of 40k, even 8th edition, and 8th edition was probably the most balanced of all of them. There was a tendency for codex creep. There was a tendency for later codices to be better than the earlier ones, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not getting that feeling here. They all seem to be quite well balanced against one another, and they're also internally balanced as well.
That can't be right. Who the hell's been writing these books? Because that's not how this works.
It feels like there's a plan. It feels like they've sat down and said, okay, we don't want this situation where some players are given short shrift, you know? We want them all to be able to play on a level playing field and have equal amounts of fun. Which is great. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
It's the way it should be working from day one. So
they need to shift that over to AOS now.
Yes, please.
A little bit, because there are still some armies that have been given, you know. Well, ironically, the Maggotkin need a new book.
Yeah, well, they were one of the earlier releases, weren't they? If I remember,
they were first, yeah.
And ironically, are looking a little bit anemic now. Although, did you see on the Warhammer community where they talked about the history of Beastmen?
Yes.
I was surprised for them to mention Khorngor and Pestigor.
Yeah, I mean, when's the last time you saw those miniatures turn up anywhere?
And they even portrayed them, didn't they? They showed you the old miniatures of the Khorngor and the Pestigor. So I was like, that's interesting, because they technically don't exist in the game anymore.
I mean, you could say they were just going down memory lane to show you how things were.
Possibly.
If you were going to do that, you would have thought they would have paired them up with some of the other people rather than pulling them and giving them their own image.
Right. I think when the new books hit, they're coming back.
Yeah.
I think they're coming back. I mean,
it makes sense.
The Slangor, they've reintroduced the Slangor. I mean, and they're brilliant. Oh my God, they're fantastic. They're like, yes, the sexy Beastmen.
And I think Tumblr just woke up when you said that.
Right, yeah, getting all of the.
Well, it's Twitter now because Tumblr's dead. So.
Well, I'm
fair enough.
I'm sure that there's a furry contingent of the Fluffenhammer. There's a furry contingent of everything, so you know.
Oh no, not the Furrenhammer.
The Furrenhammer, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Oh, what a nightmare that would be. Anyhow, yeah, I mean, it does sound like whoever's the brain behind Ninth Ed, or New 40k or whatever you want to call it, they are very much pushing to try and get everything on a level pegging.
Oh, they want this to be the best version of 40k. There's no doubt. They are clearly like, okay, we're on a roll. You know, we're doing well with regards to our public image and whatnot and our fan base. We want this to be the best it has ever been, and that seems to be what they're doing.
And yet they still don't have squats.
Not yet. Give it time.
No.
Give it time. If they're bringing back everything else. I mean, there was even a picture of an Imperial Beastman in that article.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there was, wasn't there?
Yeah, they showed you the Imperial Beastman model that was available for the Imperial Guard. You know, back before they were such bigots, basically, you know, when they actually would have like abhumans and things in their forces. So that's cool. That's very cool.
You know what would be really fun to do at some point? To chart the Beastmen through a Fluffenhammer that was just charting the evolution and the change of Beastmen.
They've been in it since the beginning. You know, they
predate Warhammer.
Right. I mean, they're kind of like some of the first children of chaos, aren't they? So yeah, those old miniatures, the old metal miniatures, bloody hell.
So I remember trying to think what the name of it was. The Beastmen were originally done for a different game.
They were part of a different game system, weren't they?
Yeah.
I can't remember, but they...
it begins with a G.
Yeah, and then they rolled them into Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. I think early on they weren't even what they became. Like later on they became the first children of chaos. So when the polar gates in the Warhammer world collapsed and all the chaos energy saturated everything, they were the human tribes that were on the world at the time that got touched by chaos and mutated and transformed and whatnot. But that wasn't what they were earlier on. They were just a race, weren't they? They were just like a species.
Yeah. I just remembered it's RuneQuest.
They were part of RuneQuest, were they? Right.
The Glorianifer.
Right.
Whatever setting that was anyhow. Because they were the Brew. And I'm annoyed that I forgot that name. It's such a nice word to say.
Did you say the Brood?
The Brew. No,
okay.
Brew.
Oh, okay.
Brew.
Silly name.
Brew. Say it with me. Brew. Sorry. I just went off on one there. I do apologise.
But I love the fact they're reintroducing them. I do love the fact they're reintroducing them, and they're making this variety. I mean, like there was for the longest time they were all Zeech, weren't they? You know,
yeah,
it was all Zangors. It was all Zangor. It was all Zangor for some reason. And don't get me wrong, I love the Zangor. I think they're fantastic additions.
Oh, they're wonderful.
To both 40k and to Warhammer. But it's lovely to see the other versions coming back.
So here's a question, right? So the Zangor are slightly avian in nature. The Zangor. The Slangor are more
BDSM.
Yeah, BDSM bull.
Goat.
Sex goat. That type of thing.
That's
what animal attributes do you think they'll do for the Corngors and the Pestigors?
Well, the Corngor actually did have a description of that back in the Slaves to Darkness days. They had more dog-like qualities.
Yeah,
because Khorne is the Great Hound, you know?
Yeah.
So they had like wolf and dog-like qualities. So like with like a Doberman's head. In fact, there was a miniature that had like a Doberman's head. You know, it was a Beastman with like a Doberman-style head.
Yeah.
Nurgle had like there's a picture of a Beastman. You may have seen this, Adam, in The Lost and the Damned. It's a beautiful sort of pencil drawing of a Nurgle Beastman next to his shrine. He's got like maggot-like qualities.
Yeah, I remember.
He's got like this big pulsating maggot-like body, and it's gross. It's really brilliant, really brilliant. But anything like, I mean, Nurgle's got lots of animal aspects. So worms and flies, obviously, flies are a big thing in Nurgle.
Yeah, true.
Crows. Nurgle has an aspect as the Great Crow.
You
know, the harbinger of death and decay.
I think if you did crow, though, you're getting a little too close to the Zangor.
To get away from that.
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, with Slaanesh, they could have gone for snakes and reptiles because Slaanesh is the great serpent, you know.
True enough, yeah. It would just seem a shame if they just went straight for here's a bubbly bowie goat.
Yeah. So I mean, what they could do with the Pestigore, rather than giving them like a specific animal aspect, is make them like standard beastmen, but Nurgle. So they've got like rent open, like the putrid Blight King. So they've got rent open, swollen bellies, and all that business going on.
I understand why beastmen are always goatee, but
well, that wasn't always the case,
was
it?
Not goatee.
Yeah, that wasn't always the case. The goat beastmen were a specific subspecies. They were called Caprigore.
Yep.
And then you had the bull ones, which were called Bovigore. And then you had the hound ones, which were called something else, and like Avigore, which were the bird ones, and so on. I mean, technically, beastmen, the way they're originally described, they don't have any standard body form.
No, well, that's the thing I was going back to, the old fiction where you'd have beastmen that had the head of a wolf, but the forearms of a snake,
Like tendrils, octopoid like bodies, and all sorts of weirdness. It wasn't until late on that they crystallized as the Caprigore became the standard beastman.
Yeah, then you got the Ungor and the...
that's right. Yeah, the Bestigore and all of those guys. Bovigore, they called them, didn't they? The bull-style ones.
The Gore Bulls, they became into them, didn't they?
That's right, yeah.
Basically, I really want the Pestigores to be pigs. I want them to be pigs. I think
that would be great, wouldn't
it? If they
it?
were just big fat pigs, I
would be ace.
So into that.
Swinegore. Swinegore, yeah. I think that's a great idea. Dirty, sort of filthy boar-like with tusks and things. That'd be ace.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I've always liked the idea of in my head, and it's always been sad it doesn't exist. Just like fat, armor-wearing, greasy hair pigs.
I love that idea. I think that's a great one. I don't think it's going to happen because it's not in the old background, and it looks like for these new Beastmen incarnations, it looks like they're always referring back to the older miniatures ranges.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
It does.
So like the Zarngor look like the old Zarngor. The Slarngor look like certain old, really old metal or lead miniatures of Beastmen.
In a lot of cases, we are talking lead. We're not talking white metal in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
We're talking tasty poison.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Which is
Don't
cool.
lick your fingers, children.
No, do not. Don't stab yourself with a sword. You'll regret it.
But speaking of old things that are new again, there's something else that popped up this last week, which I wanted to just draw everyone's attention to. Most because Andy got really happy and excited and then showed me, and I became very happy and excited. And then I saw the internet and went, oh, for God's sake.
Oh.
So, Andy, Total War 3, hey?
Yeah, Total War Warhammer 3's finally been announced. It's been a long gap since Total War Warhammer 2 came out. God, I can't even remember when that one came out. We got a trailer, and over on the Warhammer channel, we got a designing... the two new human armies. For some reason, it wasn't on the CW. Was it CW? It's whoever do Total Warhammer CA. It wasn't on the CA website. So the trailer basically goes here. Kislev get their own entire unique army faction with their own unique army units as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, this will be the first time Kislev have had any kind of representation outside of just text, right?
Yeah, for a long time.
I mean, you had the Kislev horseback riders.
There were a few dotty introductions of Kislev, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything in Regiment of Renown, was there?
I don't think so.
Probably
Dogs
not.
of War, no.
We get an idea of what one of the legendary lords will be. It's a lady with a frozen crown.
Oh,
I don't know who she is.
She was a miniature. Yeah, she used to ride a bear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a miniature. Way back.
So she's going to probably be their main legendary lord. We see a few unit types, all dressed very much like what I would consider Mongolians.
Yes, yeah.
All with those kind of triangular furry hats. We also see bear cavalry, so I expect they'll be either classed as either monster cav, or they'll probably be designated kind of like the Demigriff Knights were for the Empire. Kind of that same unit type with obviously different stat lines and whatnot, but I would imagine that. They also had the Kislevite horsemen with the big curved feather plume on their back.
Yep.
And we also see surrounding her tent, we see normal kind of what I would get would be man-at-arms kind of deal, just men with swords. And in front of her tent, there are two with like shrouds over their mouths and halberds, but with a frozen blade on top, very much like her. So I'm guessing they're more of the elite armor-piercing, two-handed weapon kinds. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting in itself.
Yeah, I mean, is this the first time that Kislev has even like arisen since the mid days of the old world?
Pretty much,
in terms of like having anything done,
anything at all, like any reference, any mention, even.
Well,
I mean, they are mentioned. You can play as you can confederate Kislev like in the other Tall Warhammer games. Right. It's just their unit type is the Empire units. There's nothing really different about Kislev. It's just like it's like the Border Kings and Talia or something like that.
Talia,
Talia. They all just share the same. Like this is the Empire faction. They all have the Empire units. Just because it wasn't possible to do it. So there is now diversity, at least between the main Reichland area and then Kislev now. Have
that's
their own
great.
thing, which is really nice. So you'll be able to play as Kislev. They'll have their own. They'll probably have at least maybe one or two more legendary lords, and then other lord types, and then they'll probably. I'm guessing. There'll be a new law of magic introduced as well, which is whatever the ice law
it'll be winter
is.
based, won't it? It'll be ice based or something. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because that wasn't in the game as of yet. So then they'll have to give that to the High Elves because the High Elves have access to every fucking winds of magic, apart from what is it, vampire? I think they don't have vampire.
the necromantic.
The necromantic.
No, vampire specifically. They do have the lore of death, but not the vampire, because they don't get Winds of Death, which is the best spell in the game.
Right.
That is.
Winds of Death is ridiculously powerful. With Manfred in one level, because Manfred's one of the best spellcasters, and he also has Winds of Death. I managed to kill 1,064 individual people. Winds of Death wipes the floor, especially when the basic troops and they have no armor, they just tumble.
Brilliant.
It's nutty. But also in the trailer, they showed what we knew Total War Warhammer 3 was going to be, which was going to be the introduction of Chaos. Finally, because previously we only had Nausicaa, which is an old faction because they were in the first game right at the end. Yeah. So they're much better than the first faction, which was Warriors of Chaos, which was a paid DLC on day one for the very first game.
Come on!
Yeah. And it's one of the worst factions.
So you're paying for a terrible faction. Great.
At the time, they were fine, but because they haven't had any work since the first game, or next to no work, they have suffered massively. They still have one of the best melee units in the game in terms of wins.
Yeah.
Which are chosen halberds.
Of course, chosen halberdiers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing that came close was the Swordsmasters of Hoeth. That was the only thing that could come close to fighting them, but in the end they still lost.
Well, they're still in the game. They're actually still in AOS. Those chosen halberdiers. They're called something different, but they're still in it.
Yeah, so in terms of that, Warriors of Chaos was shit. Beastmen were pretty bad as well. Beastmen, again, are one of the worst factions in the game because they've had no work to them since the first game, practically.
Poor beasties.
Yeah, pretty much. But we got to see that they are the first faction, clearly, that they're showing off at the moment is Khorne. They showed off bloodletters. I don't know whether that'll be basic infant. I have no idea how this army is going to work. But there's also like Chaos Warriors on what they call Juggernauts.
Juggernauts, yeah.
So that's going to be their main cavalry type.
So the Blood Crushers, I think they're called, aren't they?
Maybe. You might be right. And then obviously there was a Bloodthirster as well in there.
Obviously. I mean, if they do that right, that is going to be the unit.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll use a Bloodthirster as a legendary lord, like your main commander, or if they'll just have it as a monstrous type of unit.
Because, I mean, Bloodthirsters, in that sort of setting of the game, were godlike.
Yeah. I can't imagine it wouldn't be a legendary lord, because otherwise you could just do one of the stupid armies, like 1 Wurzag and 19 giants, which also. So imagine the legendary lord, or the lord of whatever the chaos faction might be, and then 19 bloodthirsters.
Yeah. Oh, what?
It would be a little bit too powerful. So he must be the legendary lord, or at least lord type.
I would hazard a guess to say yes.
In terms of gameplay. So that's interesting. There wasn't a huge amount shown for chaos. It was just kind of those 3 bits.
Yeah.
And then right at the end, there was a little tease with a... This is the thing that Griff looks forward to, and I'm sure you'll look forward to this as well, because I'm guessing you don't know this, do you?
No.
What is one of the really old human factions that has next to never been talked about, George?
Oh, one of the oldest human factions that's never been talked about. I mean, we're not talking Bretonia here, right?
No, they're in the game. Let's see, this land resides close to the Path of the East. Path to the East.
No way. What's it called? Not Araby.
No. They're near to the
Cathay?
Warpstone Desert. Yeah.
Cathay?
It's Cathay.
They're actually doing a Cathay force.
An entire Cathay force.
Warhammer itself never did that.
No, they already have sketches out for what the units are.
Jeez, that's brilliant.
They haven't done any... at this point, we don't think they've done any of the models for them for the game, but they have the design sketches done.
God.
I'll grab them.
That's a surprise. That's a surprise because, it's only ever been mentioned in the background before. There's never been any detail on what Cathay is. Just a vague allusion to it's basically the eastern part of the Warhammer world.
Yes.
Let's have a look at these
with an actual dragon emperor.
Wow. So they've gone for Qing dynasty, yeah? They've gone for the Chinese dynasties for this.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much the mythological take on China of that time.
Yes, they're pretty nice, I've got to say.
And they have abominable snowmen or Sasquatch
Yetis.
In there.
They've got Yetis.
Yeah. It's just a picture, and he's a big monkey man with 2 giant maces.
Oh, that is so cool. I'm surprised that Warhammer itself or AOS hasn't gone for something like that, to be honest.
In terms of creativity, Total War Warhammer's they've already made a few. They're doing Kislev. They've buffed out Kislev, which Games Workshop couldn't do. No. They're doing Carthy. And of course they've done the Vampire Coast as well, which is their entirely unique thing. So they've been able to do things that would never be they were never realized within the game.
That's fun, isn't it? So they've taken the niche stuff, the stuff that's only ever alluded to, and they've just gone deep with it.
Yeah, because why not? You can do.
This is where we get interesting. So you look at the Ice Queen and the troop types and stuff in that trailer, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now let's go right back to around about this time last year when the Old World was announced.
Ah, yes.
Right? Now what was the first thing that the Old World showed as a concept? Kislev.
It was Kislev, wasn't it? Yeah.
They had the Kislev designs.
Do you think that they're going to be one of the first proper armies they release for it or something?
Well, the Kislev designs in this are almost a one-to-one to the Kislev designs that they showed off last year for the Old World.
Oh, interesting.
So
it's a bad idea to kind of tie it all together like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea.
So my current thinking is that the Old World is going to be using Total War Warhammer. I hate that name. Can I just point out how much I hate that name? It should be called Total Warhammer, right?
Because the problem is the Total War series. That's the issue.
I'm aware.
I 100% agree with you, though.
Total War Warhammer is such a mouthful.
It's almost a tautology, isn't it? It's verging on a tautology, yeah.
And or even Warhammer Total War,
Yeah. They weren't going to do that. They were going to have their own title first, of course.
Right,
Total War Warhammer, it really annoys me trying to say it. So, Total Warhammer.
Lads.
That's really fascinating. If they go for the Kislev forces first in the resurrected Warhammer, if you like, in the old world, that's going to be fascinating. So they're going to go for one of the sort of least known areas of the Empire.
if they're going to do what I think they're going to do, which is set it in the time of the three emperors.
Right.
3 emperors, 5 emperors.
So a point
Whichever
of
it is.
total war in the Empire. That makes sense.
Then what I think you'll see is we'll get a lot of humans all hit the ground running at once.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have Kislev, I completely can't think of any other factions from that time.
Inheim, Abelin.
Yeah. So you get all of them together.
Yeah.
The majority of them are going to just be, here as Empire men, you paint them up with the colours that you want. And then you have Kislev, and then if they're doing Cathay in this, does that mean we're going to actually get to see Cathay in the old world? Because if they do something with Cathay and Araby in the old world, in the old fantasy battle setting, you bastards.
Yeah, that's
just made me interested in the thing that I really hoped not to get interested in.
Likewise, I've got to say, I mean, it's one of those things that I anticipate watching from a distance, but who knows?
If you want to be really cynical about the choice of Cathay, you could argue that it's a good way to get into the Chinese market.
Yeah.
And that is something that a lot of people have said.
Which makes sense.
Makes sense.
It's understandable.
I mean, I mean, it's not entirely cynical. It's just business, isn't it? You know, it does make sense that.
But doesn't that mean they'd have to remove the undead?
Well, it depends what they sell in China, I suppose.
Because isn't there a thing about the dead?
Especially skulls. Yeah, they remove a lot of that. They don't like to show any kind of symbols of skulls or anything like that. In previous like video games like Modern Warfare and stuff, they've had to like strip a load of shit out for the Chinese market.
Oh, that's fascinating. So no icons of mortality, essentially.
No, pretty much. I can't remember the reason for it, but there's when things are sold in China, sometimes they are absolutely rendered apart. Sometimes they're rendered apart before then and just sold to the American and Western audiences, and people get really annoyed at that, which is understandable again.
Yeah.
The only reason I know anything about that is because of World of Warcraft, because the entire Forsaken had to get completely overhauled, didn't they? For
they had to be changed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. I knew like that, you know, there's a lot of instances where Western media has to be changed for the Chinese market, but I didn't know specifically about the symbols of mortality.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that could be an issue, which is again understandable, but you know,
consider it's Warhammer. Yes, probably.
Yeah, that makes things very difficult
around Warhammer.
I was going to say that makes certain armies like verboten, doesn't it? You just can't do them.
Certain armies, it makes the bloody logo difficult.
Right, you can't have them. I mean, it's bizarre. Yeah.
How do you do 40k without skulls?
Right.
I dare you to take any rulebook, any old fantasy rulebook, and find me a page without a skull on it.
Right.
Christ, can you imagine the drinking game? Drink for every skull on each page.
Oh, you'd be dead.
You die.
You'd be dead very quickly, you know?
Yeah.
Like, very quickly.
Don't try that at home, kids. We don't want to cause you to do that.
We do not advocate that at all.
Hey, kids, look at me. I'm going to get drunk on water.
I don't advocate that for adults, you know, it doesn't.
Let alone children. Yeah. I think with all that, then, it's time for us to start pulling everything to a close.
Yeah.
So, Andy.
Me.
Would you like to begin to tell the nice people at home where they can and can't find you?
I won't tell you where you can't find me, because I don't want you to find me there. But you can find me on Twitter as @CCTFW, YouTube as Cobra Commander TFW. I also do the Moonbase 2 podcast with my buddy Mikey, where we talk about Transformers every week, and that's Moonbase 2. You can just throw that out there to the internet, and you'll probably find us.
Yeah.
And I'm also on Twitch, which is @CCTFW, and I usually stream there between 11 o'clock UK time in the evening. And about 1 o'clock in the evening or morning, I suppose, UK time. Yay! Because that's the only time I can do it.
And George, where can people not find you, and where can they find you?
Well, people can find me knocking about on the Exaggerated Elegy channel on YouTube, where there's all sorts of stuff. Currently, Let's Playing Visage, which is a horrifically brilliant horror game. Just the best horror game I've ever played. Hands down. You can find my written fiction, links to my written fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com, where there are links to 3 short story collections, I think, thus far, and another one coming very, very soon. And if you want to just chat, you can come and chat to me over on Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy.
Excellent stuff. As for me, you can find me sitting here screaming at my computer for not working. You can also find me on Twitter at Grufflock. You can find the Fluffenhammer at the Fluffenhammer on Twitter as well. Yeah. See how easy that is?
That worked out well.
Yeah, it's really, really simple. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Fluffenhammer. We have a page and a group. And this week, the group has been talking about hero cults.
Yeah, I saw that.
You can also find us on Discord. The link is below. And and this week, Discord has been talking about Mully Psych, Private Investigator.
Okay.
It all started with hero cults. Hero cults has been like a driving force this week. There's a little crappy character in the hero cults box. And he looks like the love child of Mike and Sully from Monsters, Inc. So it just became Mully Psych. So I drew a picture of him, and that's it. Now he's now a mascot. Oh man, Discord's a wonderful place. I love Discord. It's great. You can also find us on Instagram and on YouTube, which is probably where you're listening to this. If not, go to YouTube and find us. At the moment, we have the entirety of the Psychic Awakening short stories coming out 1 a week.
That's
that
a
might
lot.
get ramped up to 2 a week if time allows.
That's a lot of stories.
It is a lot of stories, which is why I'm thinking about trying to ramp them up to 2 a week so they get done this year. Because I worked out that they would come to an end round about November. It's like,
oh bloody hell, God! So that's an almost year-long project, yeah.
Yeah, I've still got 20 of them to record. It's like, come on, this is ridiculous. I want to get into the Broken Realm short stories and other short stories that I want to read. Yeah, that's right. I want to get off this massive bit of work I've given myself to get onto other bits of work I've given myself.
Yeah, of course.
That's Adam.
That's my stupid decisions. So with all that being said, thank you very much for listening this week, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
I'll walk around and settle in, disappear for days again. Most of us were staying in, lazy like the sky. Letters flew across the wire, filtered through a million lies. The whole world's snowing up burning ties, the day John Henry died. But he blew up at that big machine, and then